Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is another one that I asked for because I have no impulse control. So this time I am reviewing Alathea, Goddess and Empress by Dylan Madeley. This is a high fantasy-esque character study. That's kind of the best way I can think of to describe it, because this is all about Alathea, our young princess and heir to the throne, as three different people are all trying to raise her in the specific ways that they think she should go and how those kind of clash together. You have her father, the emperor, who is very bloodthirsty. After a group of cultists killed his wife, he's kind of turned crazy and is trying to hunt all of them down. You have Reb, her tutor, and probably the most morally upstanding of the bunch, who is a distant relative of the emperor and is trying to make her as even-keeled and, you know, steady a leader as she can be. And then you have her nurse, Dema, who is in league with this religion and is basically trying to make Alathea both dependent on her and, like, convert her secretly. So a lot of the story revolves around these three people and the different ways they are trying to push Alathea, and at the end of the day, the big question is, what kind of leader will Alathea be? And I really like that idea of that kind of, not necessarily high fantasy-esque in that there's not a lot of overt magic. There's much more magic as symbolism, or magic as in the people in the world believe that there's like magic and sorcery, but you as the reader don't necessarily see it specifically played out. But that kind of epic medieval tale, but as a character study into the kind of character that Alathea is going to be. She is very morally gray, which I appreciated. There are certain things she does and certain, like, orders she gives that seem very childish, but everyone also has to follow through with it. So she definitely makes for a very interesting character. If you like genuinely morally gray characters, aka characters that, like, you will disagree with certain things they do, and it's not all wiped away by like sarcastic quips and being hot, you'll like this character. The struggles that I did have with this was mostly around how condensed the plot was. I asked the author ahead of time, like, about how long is the book, because I only had the Kindle version and it only had like the percentages, and he said around 200 pages. And even in certain other formats, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be any more than 250, but a lot of stuff happens. There are a lot of big bads in this book, and there's so little time for any of them that it doesn't necessarily, you don't feel the threat of any of them because you've only got 200 pages for three big bads. So it's like they functionally can't take up that many pages to defeat. So it's hard to see any of them as a threat when they functionally, to fit the length of the story, have to be moved past in X number of pages. There's also some struggles with, again, with that plot condensing. New characters are introduced and it is more telling than showing the relationship between them. Like, you're told the love and the affection much more than you see it, which is a struggle. But I did like the idea of the plot. The things that happen in the plot, while it was condensed, was very intriguing, and some twists and turns were taken. The first couple I kind of saw coming. The first couple were a little bit standard for this kind of story, that you could probably see just the next natural step for it to take. And then later on, some more bold and daring plot decisions were made, which made it for a lot more interesting story. One decision that Alathea makes in particular to overcome her enemies was low-key heartless, but also kind of cunning, and like, okay, that's a horrible thing to do, but also really smart. Like, it was kind of that, you know, morally gray. On one hand, really effective. On the other hand, not the best thing. So it was definitely one of those fun twists and turns. I just wish that they had been stretched out and been given a lot more time to breathe than in other instances. And one of the big bads did feel a little bit out of place, a little bit thrown in to have just another one for Alathea to prove herself. But the villain in theory was pretty interesting, so I appreciated that. But the biggest struggle I had with this book was the overall writing style. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it purple prose, but it was very academic prose. And to the extent that I couldn't tell what was just symbolism for philosophy and what was an actual plot point that was happening. There were certain occasions where I had to reread to be like, okay, is this actually a thing that's going on or a very drawn out metaphor? So that was a bit of a struggle. And also, everyone spoke in that same very flowery, like regal language. And of course you expect it of like a princess and the emperor and like all of that. You expect that, but like also like peasants were thinking in that language, and the quote unquote barbaric clans to the north were all thinking and speaking in this very formal way. So it kind of washed the entire story with the same tone, and you didn't really get a feel for different places of different cultures. So that was a little bit of a struggle for me, and I can't tell if that's just a difference in style. The author is #actually autistic, and I can't tell for sure if that played into it or if that was just the natural style and I just don't like gel with it. It's hard to tell exactly, but this is definitely one where like I didn't connect on an emotional level with a lot of the characters so much as I was just very interested to see what was going to happen next, which isn't usually what I want with my stories, but in this case, the plot was interesting enough and the turns were interesting enough that it was enough to carry me along. Again, it's not super fantasy-esque. There's just some elements, some things that Alathea believes of her mother that don't gel with the real world. But I appreciated that. I appreciated that it was a character study and it was more focused on Alathea as a person and the kind of ruler she would be, and much more micro study on a character as opposed to a sweeping tale. And that might have been part of the problem with all these big bads, was that I was really more focused on Alathea and her growth, or, you know, descent into madness, whichever one it is, more than the outside forces that were getting involved. But I appreciated it. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I'm not sure if it's a series. It hasn't been announced as a series, but the end is open enough to continue with it. However, I am probably going to stop it here. Medieval tales and high fantasy-esque tales are a hard sell for me at the best of times, and right now, any book that I can't just easily fall into is a really hard sell because things are going wrong all over the place right now for everyone. So I still appreciated it. I would still recommend it if you like that kind of character study in medieval-esque worlds. I really do enjoy the idea of looking into what it takes to be a leader, and do you have to make moral sacrifices of your own code to lead effectively. That was really interesting, and I would highly suggest it for that. Now, if you are an indie author and are interested in a review like this one, please email me. I will have my email down in the description below. I will also have my review policy down there. Please give that a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.